To configure forwarding, I can just right click my DNS server and go to properties, or you can click this forwarders over here under this name column. They're going to open the same property sheet. But on the forwarders, I could simply go to edit and add the address I want to forward to. A common address is the Google DNS, which is 8.8.8.8. That's one of many public DNS addresses they have. So now, once I add that in, my DNS server would take all traffic for external domains and it would simply pass the query to that address to be resolved. That address would then pass the answer back to my DNS server, which I would in turn pass down to my client. So that would be standard forwarding for all external names. The other type is conditional forwarding. If I go to this conditional forwarders here under my server, I can just right click New Conditional Forwarder. Now, the reason they call this a conditional forwarder is because the domain name is the condition that will decide if it's forwarded to a specific DNS server. Well, I'm going to name this trd.com. So I'm going to say that's the domain that I want to forward traffic to. Then I just need the IP address of the DNS server that holds all those records. So now, anytime my RTS DC1 receives a query from a client that ends with trd.com, it's going to pass that to this 35.1.52.89 IP address to be resolved. If it sees a request for google.com or any website or other external domain, I don't have a conditional forwarder for those domains, so they would go back through the forwarding that we defined here at the server level, would go through those forwarders. So unknown traffic goes to forwarders here. Traffic destined for a specific domain would be a conditional forwarder. The other thing we discussed was root hints. Now, I'm still on the properties of my DNS server itself. There's a root hints tab on that property sheet. So these are the 13 root servers, A through M, that exist. Now, they have IP version 6 addresses and IP version 4 addresses, but these are the 13 servers. Now, it's sort of misleading to say there's only 13 because they would be in some of the most massive geo-separated clusters we could imagine, because they ultimately resolve all internet names. So just massive, massive secure clusters. If you don't have forwarders defined, any name that you try to connect to that is external, meaning it's not rtsnetworking.com, if you don't have a forwarder, it's passed out to your root hints, and they will pass it around and get that name resolved for you ultimately. A neat thing we can do, because we don't really manage root hints at all, they just always exist by default when you install DNS on any server. So no management or anything there. But what I'm going to do is right-click my forward lookup zone, and I'm going to create a new zone. This new zone is going to be a root zone. I'm going to leave it as an Active Directory integrated zone. That's fine. I'm going to leave replication on the default to all DNS servers running on domain controllers. That's fine. I'm going to name it. This is the important part. Dot, as in period, with nothing behind it, just dot by itself. So we'll click next for that, just with the dot on it. Dynamic updates, we'll leave that on the default. And finish. Notice it automatically added the word root in parentheses. So now this is a root server. What that means to me, if I go back to the properties of the DNS server, when I go to the root hints tab, they are now gone. If I go to the forwarders tab, they are completely blanked out. So you have no forwarders, you have no root hints. What we have told this DNS server is that it sits atop the world. There is nothing beyond you. What that ultimately means, if you try to resolve any name in a domain other than rtsnetworking.com, it'll never be resolved. This is only now capable of resolving records that reside on this domain controller. The only two zones I have is the one for RTS networking. Then I have this underscore MSDCS, but that just contains records for Active Directory. So external names could never be resolved unless we delete the root zone. So I'm going to right-click that root zone, and I will choose delete. It says, are you sure you want to delete this? I'll say yes. Now it says, this is Active Directory integrated. Are you sure you want to delete it? Because this deletion would be replicated to other domain controllers. I'm sure. So I'm going to click yes again. Now it says the root zone was deleted. Root hints must be supplied to allow recursive queries. Would you like to add them now? Well, I'm going to say yes. And it automatically populates my root hint. So they just come back to life. And if I go to forwarders, my forwarders automatically get added back in. So that's the purpose of a root zone. Stop external name resolution. Pretty fascinating concept. Now, actually, I don't want these few changes we just made here. So I'm going to delete that conditional forwarder. So I'll just right click and delete that. That is gone. For the forwarder, I'm going to go back to properties to the forwarders tab. And I'm just going to delete the 8.8.8. So when I edit, there's an option to delete. Now this 2600, that was just there by default, just an IP version 6 address. We don't do anything with that. If you delete it, it actually is just going to automatically appear again. So not even a point to delete it. But now that DNS server is back to just the default configuration before we started.